propose to begin this new webinar. Thank you very much to be with us. I see people from different continents. It's fantastic. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce, sorry for my pronunciation, Kausik Bandyopadhyay. I think everybody say in the world Kausik. Everybody know Kausik. Kausik, it's a well-known Indian professor in sport, history of sport. He managed also soccer and society. He write a lot of articles, books. And then it's a real pleasure to receive a well-known researcher. As you know, I try to advance step by step to build this webinar, to try to create a space for discussion, but not only to discuss with between European researchers, but to open the door and to discuss a lot with people from Africa, from Asia, from Latin America, and so on and so on. Football, sports, today, a global question is not a question for rich people from Western Europe. It's a global question. Then I think it's a very, very important and very interesting topics. I want to thank a lot our guests because it's very late in India for the moment. Then we appreciate a lot this your ability to give us a presentation. Kausik, you have the floor for 35 minutes. And after this, we have time to discuss and to have some questions. Thank you very much, Kausik. We will record also this webinar and we will put after on our YouTube channel. It's very good that people can also see the presentation from all the parts in the world. Thank you very much, Kausik. You have the floor.
Thank you, Professor Diwale, for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts on the contemporary sport history. Now, I have two very specific questions to address in this talk. First, a disciplinary one. Is it possible to study the future in history? And if yes, the second one, how can we study contemporary sport with a focus on future from a historical perspective? Now, I start this talk with some interesting experiences and anecdotes from my late student life and early academic career. And am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Like any student of history in India, I was also taught from the beginning that history deals with the past. A past that mostly ended either in 1947 with India's independence for Indian history, or with the end of the Second World War in 1945 and the onset of the Cold War in case of history of other nations. During my undergraduate days, I was always curious about the study of international relations in history, while I was intrigued by the lessons of India's foreign policy in my postgraduate classes. My usual queries about why these two subjects that included the most recent events are taught in history received more or less the same answers. It was important for students of history to study international relations and India's foreign policy as connected and complementary themes, or it was important for them, I mean the students of history, to have a working knowledge of world politics and national foreign policy as a corollary to history. The term history never occurred to me in undergraduate days, except when I studied the Greek historians, the great Greek historians Herodotus and Thucydides. That was the occasion when I first came to realize that the study of history began with the study of contemporary history. Herodotus, the father of history, wrote the history of the Great Persian Wars within a few decades after the conclusion of the war, that is the Second Persian War. while Thucydides, the father of scientific history, wrote on the Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta and their allies, to which he himself was an eyewitness. On the other hand, I came across two fascinating works that made my conviction to study contemporary history stronger. One was Geoffrey Barraclough's famous An Introduction to Contemporary History, which was published in the early 1960s, and V.V. Palabushevic and A.M. Diakov edited A Contemporary History of India, which was published in 1964 as a translation later on. The first book was a classic exposition of the definition, methodology, and study of contemporary history, focusing on the 20th century, particularly Europe, while the second, originally written in Russian in 1959, covered the period 1918 to 1955 of Indian history. Now, in the late 1990s, when I proposed to undertake my doctoral work for a period which ended with 1980, I first faced objection that I should not study a period so close to my time. I was, however, determined to stick to my proposed period of study, and I ultimately pursued my PhD on the social history of Bengal, which ended in 1980. Although my doctoral work was on the social history of football, my interest in cricket was no less, and it was with my writings on the politics and culture of Indian cricket that my authorial tryst with contemporary history began. With the renewal of India-Pakistan diplomatic exchanges in the late 1990s, when Pakistan came to play a test series in India, I watched India and Pakistan play a cricket test at the stadium for the first time. I watched India and Pakistan play in front of a huge crowd and great fanfare at the Eden Gardens, Calcutta. It was that time when I first planned to write something on India-Pakistan cricket in the context of contemporary politics, diplomacy, and culture. The decision was critically and crucially important as it paved the way for examining the politics and culture of India-Pakistan cricket for the next 2.5 decades of my research. The 1999 Eden Test was followed by the famous Kargil War between the two countries that interrupted again the relations between the two nations, and the bilateral cricket as well was also stopped. At the same time, I witnessed the hype around India-Pakistan cricket match in the 1999 World Cup held in England at the height of the Kargil War. It was followed by, all of you know, 9/11 terrorist attack on America and the attack on Indian Parliament on 13 December 2001. Yet, being well versed in the history of India-Pakistan relations, I could hunch the possibility of next bilateral series sooner or later, as the two states would come to the table for normalization of relations in which cricket has always had a major role to play. So I waited patiently for the occasion when the two would again play a bilateral series. This happened in early 2004 when India toured Pakistan after nearly 15 years. My advantage was that I began to gather primary materials for the study since early 1999 and continued to do so as things unfolded year by year. It became much easier for me to collect sources for studying that tour in a historical perspective. Meanwhile, I wrote a co-authored piece on cricket as everyday life on the experiences of 2003 World Cup, which included a section on India-Pakistan match during the Cup. Finally, I wrote on the complex connection between cricket, politics, and diplomacy in the context of India-Pakistan cricket relations, with specific focus on India's 2004 cricket tour of Pakistan, my first true attempt at writing something substantial on contemporary history. This also set the ball rolling for a series of writings on India-Pakistan cricket, terrorism, and regional cooperation in South Asia in the next 1 decade, and for planning a lifetime work on the cultural history of India-Pakistan cricket, which is still in the making. Now, one may ask the question, where do I place the future in the above, which I have already told, academic experience? The future I decided to take into account in 1999 pointed to the relevance of the future of India-Pakistan cricket in a long continuum of time, which started in 1952 when the two nations had played their first bilateral series and still continues in the absence of any one-day bilateral cricket after 26/11 Mumbai terror attack in 2008. During all these years, whenever the two sides played against each other, mostly on foreign soil, I never failed to collect relevant materials for continuing my study of the evolution of India-Pakistan cricket relations and in terms of politics, diplomacy, and culture. So this is it. A student of history can, in certain cases, take future into consideration for studying a process which past continues in the present and goes through or ends in the future. In that sense, the future becomes part of a longer process of history and inevitably becomes the past for the study of the historian. In other words, once you decide on doing this kind of connected history in a time continuum, the future becomes a part of the past for your study. Examples can be multiplied, but this much is enough for the time being as an introduction. Now, my colleagues from the other social sciences may be surprised to see how in the discipline of history, we are so much worried about justifying the study of the future, because in other social sciences, looking at the future, recommending things for the future is quite natural. But in history, things are absolutely different. However, since view that history deals with the past and the historian has no business talking about the future. E.H. Carr once said that good historians have future in their bones, but that too is essentially considered to be the vision of a historian embedded in her or his interpretation. However, when any historian pursues contemporary history, which began with the two great ancient Greek historians, the horizon becomes more open-ended for her or him. In contemporary history, the historian has the liberty to come up to the present if the theme of the study requires such a timeline. But is it really possible to include the future into the study of contemporary history? Now, my conviction is that it is possible to consider the future in studying a continuing past or a past in transition. In doing so, I draw inspiration directly from Thucydides. And that's why I call it a Thucydidean perspective. Thucydides' decision and plan to study the Peloponnesian War from the very beginning and come out with the finest history of the war remained unique. I quote Thucydides. Thucydides, the Athenian, wrote the history of the war fought between Athens and Sparta, beginning the account at the very outbreak of the war in the belief that it was going to be a great war and more worth writing about than any of those which had taken place in the past. I'm unquote. In such case, the future becomes an integral part of a past which goes beyond the present to take into account the future. The historian in such a context becomes an essential part of the process by which the past delves deep into the future and creates a continuum to connect between the past, present, and future. I call this considered future in the study of contemporary history, the future past or future as past. The future past becomes viable only after the future becomes a past, but the study of that future commences well before that. That is when it remains distinctly in the future. The historian makes a clear decision and plans well with proper methods to study it, contextualizes it within a past historical process or broader historical perspective, and connects it with the present where the historian is situated. So I employ a conceptual paradigm of studying the future as future past in the context of before and during a particular historical process or event or development, and proposes a methodological shift in the study of contemporary history. The idea of present as past too is embedded in this paradigm as we start from the present in a past historical perspective. I'm going to give you a few examples of how I have considered future in my studies on contemporary history. I have started with India-Pakistan cricket and talked about the relation between cricket, diplomacy, and terrorism in South Asia in the 2000s and 2010s. But let me come to a few different aspects of it. For example, if I take into consideration a neighboring country of India, Bangladesh, I tried to study the impact of the FIFA Men's World Cup on Bangladesh in 2006. Now, in order to study the impact of the World Cup on Bangladesh, on the public life of Bangladesh, I started gathering materials on Bangladesh from Bangladesh through my friends, through the initial internet access to different newspapers from 2005 onwards. I don't know whether all of you know or not. Now, Bangladesh is a football crazy country, just as it is a cricket crazy country. And in Bangladesh, you will always find the two sides, the Argentines and the Brazilians. there has been a serious conflict in terms of transnational fandom between the Bangladeshis. You have more and more Argentine supporters with the rise of Messi, but earlier it was the Brazilians who dominated. Now, in Bangladesh, during the World Cup of 2006, which I tried to take note of as an everyday historian, I could find how this conflict between Argentina and Brazil gradually grew up and led to some astonishing findings. I mean, there were suicides being committed when Argentina was expelled from the tournament, ultimately probably in the quarterfinal by being defeated by Germany. The Brazilians actually followed suit because Brazil also had an exit from the tournament. And the 2006 World Cup was won ultimately by Italy. Now, this kind of transnational fandom and the clashes between Bangladeshis who were distant from the two countries of Latin America provide a unique opportunity to study transnational fandom in a South Asian perspective. But remember, I decided to do the research 1 year back. I mean, from 2000 or in 2005. So it was much more easy for me to understand how the build up to the World Cup took place in Bangladesh and how it unfolded gradually with my everyday notes from various sources. Next, I come to Men's Cricket World Cup 2007 and 11 in Bangladesh. In both cases, I was present in Bangladesh. I was doing ethnography, but it was a pre-planned ethnography. Why I'm talking about pre-planned ethnography? Because sometimes in contemporary history, when you are actually trying to study future, you need some kind of hunch, some kind of experience. If I may use the term, which may sound to the historians bizarre, kind of premonition, speculation. And I landed in Bangladesh just 1 day before the match between India and Bangladesh in the World Cup preliminary round. And I always wanted Bangladesh to win, being an Indian as a researcher. Although as an Indian, I definitely supported India. But why? Because I wanted to see how the Bangladeshis respond to such a victory, such an unlikely victory. And the new generation of youth, Bangladeshi youth, actually provided me the opportunity for kind of cricket fandom that the Bangladeshis began to represent. Now, that was exactly what happened. In that match, Bangladesh upset India by clinching a victory. And in that particular match, the only Bengali player in Indian team, Saurav Ganguly, who used to be the captain of India earlier, played a very good innings. So the Bangladeshis came with the opinion that the Indian team comprised a team of pussies, except the Bengal tiger, Saurav Ganguly. So 10 pussies and 1 tiger. So, this kind of reflection, this kind of response, I could gather through my ethnography with a handycam in my hand. Throughout the night, the celebration went on because the tournament took place in West Indies, and the time gap was such that it was the entire night which took the Bangladeshis to come out to the roads. The 2011 World Cup, which was jointly organized by India, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. Again, Bangladesh was the host nation. And again, I continued my study from 2007 onwards and look at the way the social history of cricket in Bangladesh began to unfold. So again, it was my decision to study cricket in Bangladesh well ahead of time. That is probably 4 years earlier, when Bangladesh was actually awarded to host the cup. So these examples can be multiplied, but these examples provide a kind of warning that the conventional historical jinx that future cannot be considered in history, probably it's high time to challenge. Finally, I come to another interesting aspect of sport research, which actually has been done by many scholars during the period of COVID-19, which I call the COVID regime, say 2020 to 2022. Now, when the COVID-19 began, some of my friends already knew that probably I was going to plan something on it. And I had a discussion with some of my close friends across the world that what can be done. Now, what I planned in the month of March and April was that how the COVID-19 unfolds and what was going to be the impact on the entertainment world, particularly on the world of sport. And in my case, it's the soccer world. And from April onwards, I began to write to some of my close friends, some of the well-known scholars, that you come up with your reflections on how the COVID-19 had made an impact on the sports world, particularly soccer. And I was then already planning a special issue for soccer and society, where my plan was to explore, kind of collate the initial reactions, initial comments, initial reflections about how the COVID-19 as a disease, as a regime, began to disturb the soccer world, began to shape a kind of new reality for the soccer world. At that point of time, we always talked about uh, how it made a disruption across the world, barring a few exceptions. So the way I mean this volume was perceived, edited and published, provides an example that you have to have a vision, a long vision into the future. And the way it unfolded over the year in 2021, January, February, the volume was published. Now, this kind of thinking leads to more and more fruitful historical research. Definitely, these researches are interdisciplinary in character, and uh, uh, you know, sometimes it's cross-disciplinary as well. So it's very, very important to understand in the world of sport, at least, that there are possibilities when you can actually study uh, the future, a kind of considered future. Now, I wind up my case studies with the forthcoming event, because whatever I have told you, all have already been done in the past. Now, uh, I mean, in 2026, June, July, it will be the men's World Cup, FIFA World Cup, to be hosted by United States of America, Canada, and Mexico. Now, already we planned long back, along with two very important scholars, Tamir Baron and Daniel Ritchie, the North American World Cup 2026, who they actually planned it. And I was very happy to accept it for Soccer and Society. Why? Because again, it considers uh, a mega sports event in terms of different aspects, in terms of different dimensions of it, like security, like economy, soft power, soccer culture, fandom, and so on. The articles have already been published online, and the issue is expected just before the World Cup. So, if you want to really study the 2026 World Cup, Men's World Cup, then you need to start studying it at least a year back, when the preparations for the World Cup began in full swing in the country, in the host countries, particularly given the way this World Cup is generating different kinds of interest. And given the current international context, when you have a war going on between Iran, United States of America, and Israel. Now, you know that Iran's matches are being scheduled in America. So it's going to be very, very interesting. You cannot keep things undercover. I mean, you have to start studying it right from the beginning, and you have to get on with things as things unfold. So that is very important for studying the 2026 World Cup historically, in a historical perspective. But you must start studying it from the beginning. I mean, from a time which is already in the past, and probably the things will happen in the future. Now, assessing the nature of political, diplomatic, social, cultural, and commercial impact of the World Cup requires a decision, therefore, to start studying it, and we gradually lead to the event. That is, before the event, uh, uh, as the event takes place in June, July 2026, that is during the event, and the sequel to the event, following its immediate implications or even long-term legacies. So while the event is still in the future, the researcher in history should start collecting sources, gaining insights, taking notes, doing ethnography, doing ethnography, putting jots and dots, I mean, kind of creating loose ends of arguments, writing bits and pieces, making inferences, positing interpretations, and so on. At the future depends, therefore, on an a priori decision of the historian. Certain core dimensions of considering the future in historical research emerge. And again, I may sound bizarre to the conventional historical academia. I talk about telepathy, telepathic vision, premonition, active hunch, speculation, conjecture, with conscious or subconscious trick. I know, again, this makes me a candidate for introducing anarchy in historical research, but I can't help it, because unless you do this, unless you access your sources now in this digital world with the unfolding of events, many of them would simply vanish within a short time. And after 10, 20 years, you won't have access to those sources. So that's it. The study of future past should open up immense possibilities for interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary approaches in historical studies, thereby making rooms for more sophisticated refinements in historical methodology. Collaboration with other disciplines and adoption of methods from other disciplines are crucial, albeit with the compliance of the basics of historical methodology, both thematically and methodologically. So I end here with the note that contemporary sport provides a unique opportunity of studying the future in history from a Thucydidean perspective, projecting a long vision of contemporary history. Thank you. I've tried to be brief so that I can respond to more questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kausik, and thank you to respect exactly the time. You know, yellow hand, then don't hesitate. It's a good occasion to discuss about this very interesting subject. Annick, you have the floor.
Am I audible? Hello.
Hello.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So thank you, Professor Bandyopadhyay, for your exciting presentation. So I am asking that, like, how can contemporary historian methodologically engage with social media? Because like in social media, we can often see the boundaries between sources and subject and field often collapse. So as a contemporary historian, how should we approach the social media as a source of research? So I would like to know your take on it.
Okay, thank you, Kausik. You can answer.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Anik, for your question. You know that if we try to understand contemporary history, particularly sport history in the last 2 decades, social media is a part and parcel of that baggage. But in history, you have to be very, very careful while using social media resources, social media sources, because there are so much kind of deletions, deviations, interpolations, and distortions. It is always better to use complementary research materials, supplementary primary sources, and particularly more substantive primary sources while you are using social media as primary source. So, I mean, authentic corroboration, cross-checking with other substantive primary sources is a must while you are basing your history, I mean, writing on social media. Social media cannot act simply as the only primary source.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Jonathan.
Hello, Kausik. I'm Jonathan. I'm PhD student here at OLB with Jean-Michel Devreux, my supervisor. First of all, I'd like to congratulate you because it was a very linear history that you telling us here. I really understood your point in the end, like how you use all your journey, your trajectory to put some subjects in the soccer society, like in project editorial projects as well. And that's very interesting because I'm a geographer and learn about contemporary history in this kind of term that you use, like the future history. I would like that you speak more about this, how this in football could be useful for the other subjects beyond the mega events that you said about this. But for example, how the interdisciplinary perspective could be useful in terms of analyze other aspects of the sports. For example, the space, the economic aspects, uh, or even some others other subjects that is not just materialist, but in terms of affective needs, etc. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Jonathan. Good to see you for the first time physically. Uh,
Nice to meet you.
while we pursue contemporary history, we have to have a interdisciplinary perspective, a kind of comparative perspective, because it's simply impossible to stick to the conventional historical methods to look at the ways things are being done, particularly when you are looking at future. Uh, you may refer to sports geography, the great works of John Bell, or say for that matter, Y.F. Tuan, which have become very handy for the historian of football. Now, when Professor Richard Giuliani first wrote Football, the Sociology of a Global Game, it was a classic exposition of how interdisciplinary perspectives were actually accommodated into studying football from a sociological perspective. So it became apparent from the 1990s onwards in particular that no particular or single discipline can claim to study a particular sport or different sports events from a singular lens. You need different lenses, probably with sticking to your distinctive methodology, but you have to borrow from methodologies of other or methods from other disciplines. For example, when we talk about journalism, sports journalism, or media studies. Now, that has opened up a fascinating window for the historians, for the sociologists to study mega sports event in a different context. And with the coming of the internet, with the accessibility of media sources across the world, I mean, as the world has become a global village, the very concept of localization, the historians, the sociologists, the political scientists, they have become much more effective in doing their research on mega sports events like the FIFA World Cup, Men's or Women's World Cup, the Olympics, the regional level tournaments, and so on. I mean, Professor Diwale was talking about, he's planning to do something on African derbies. Now, when you come to the local derbies across the cities in different parts of the third world, so-called third world, Asia, Africa, Latin America. Now, these derbies could be studied only through media sources, only through nethnography, which has become very fashionable in recent times, only by using the cultural artifacts, which are much more the subject, much more the sources of cultural studies. So it's very important to look at sport history, definitely through the lens of history, but with aids from other disciplines. And that's why you're absolutely correct.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And now I give the floor to Cedric. I think Cedric is in Cameroon. Cedric?
I think his microphone is muted.
Well, good evening to everyone. First and foremost, I would like to express my gratitude to Professor Kausik as well as to Professor Jean-Michel Dewey. It is indeed a pleasure for me to be here. Well, my question is to know if future historians are to study sports, that is to study the history of sports, on what should they really focus? Should they focus on revised materials or internal emails? That is what I would like to know. And I will come back probably for another question.
Can you please repeat? I just don't get it. The last part of your question.
The last one, okay. I mean, what criteria should historians use to decide which of these ephemeral materials are worth preserving for future research?
Okay. Uh, uh, I mean, historians always work with the expectations that uh, uh, different kinds of sources would be preserved for them in future. I mean, then one of the major problems for sport history, particularly in the non-Western world, was the lack of reservoir of sources. I mean, the in most of the countries in Africa, in Asia, and a part of Latin America as well, probably, that the sporting institutions, clubs were not great archivists, which is the case in Western Europe or Eastern Europe, America, Russia, and so on. So that created a problem for many of us who started working on sport history from the 1990s onwards. So we had to start from the scratch, and it was very difficult to get access to sports. The situation has definitely improved in the 2010 from the 2010s onwards. But when you now plan in the 2020s in a digital world, plan to do research on a topic, on a subject, on a theme, on an event which is scheduled in the future. And the World Cups, the mega sports events are all scheduled programs. So unless there is a major issue, major hiccup, these programs are going to take place. So the decision is crucially important. Now, the decision, you can take the decision 4 years back, you can take the decision 1 year back, but the decision has to be taken whether you are going to study the future or not. And that is a way forward. It's up to the historians. Everybody does not need to do contemporary history. Everybody does not need to decide that she or he is going to study future history. But there are people like me probably who now have come to believe, I mean, given my last 25 years of experience, that it is possible to study future in the context of sport history.
Thank you. I have also one question. Kausik, can you explain us what is the statute of the study on sport in humanities in Indian university? Is it a good subject? It is, as in my country, a non-serious subject and only a reason to go to see football from the point of view of my colleagues. What is the statute for sport, history, sociology, sport in India, please?
The 2020s, I would say that sport history in India has taken off from its childhood to a kind of more mature, I mean, adolescent years, not to the mature status, adulthood, but definitely in the last 2.5 decades, numerous Indian scholars have worked on Indian sport, beginning with from the 1990s, Ashish Nandi, Ramchandra Guha, Boria Mujumdar, Ronojoy Sen, Shovik Naha, and I mean, a good number of scholars from different parts of India, and fortunately from also Bengal, from Calcutta, have done a lot of works on sport. Now, this has created a kind of a strong base of historical literature on Indian sports. On the other hand, if you talk about the studying sport in the Indian universities, in the last 10 years, sport has gradually penetrated into the syllabi of different social sciences from the school level. And in universities, in certain universities, say from the early 2010s onwards, sport has become at least a minor component of studying history, sociology, political science, international relations, and so on. And definitely in economics and management, sport has become more and more influential. So the future looks good for sport in the Indian academia and in universities.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. Okay, a last question from Jonathan again.
Thank you, Kausik. I would like to react to what you said. It was very interesting to say about contemporary story. And at the same time, I think you gave examples, derby, national derby in Africa, etc. And I would thought if this had some perspective to put light in the global south I can say, perspective in terms of highlight these histories that is not well known for the public in general. And at the same time, how we can dialogue with people, the contemporary history and the history of the future is this work would dialogue with the people, the public, the that you already say about the journalists. And in my opinion, the journalist, there's no, in this sense of the academic production, there's no compromise in terms of the values, in terms of the research that the history did in over the past, over the years. And at the same time, there's other reasons for that, but the journalist can dialogue with the public. So I would like to ask you, what do you think about how the history, the research, or the dialogue with the public in general? And that's it.
Thank you. Very interesting question. In fact, it's very difficult to truly answer the question, but let me put it in a different way. Now, as you know, with the onset of the information technology revolution and the growing importance of social media, public history has become very, very important, very, very influential. Now, the notion of public history has created, on the one hand, a kind of benefit for the publics to know about probably their national histories better than ever before. On the other hand, there is a possibility, and which is happening particularly in countries like India, a series of distortions according to political appropriation of public history, I mean national history, national or local histories. Now, given this kind of a context, sport probably can benefit more than lose out. Now, why I'm saying this? It's because probably you noted that I talked about Thucydides. Now, why I talked about Thucydides? Because Thucydides' book started with this particular sentence that the Peloponnesian War has started. It is going to be a great war. Let me write history on it. So you can say I'm just kind of being inspired by that particular notion that the World Cup, Men's World Cup 2026 is going to take place. So I'm going to study it. I study it probably from a particular perspective, maybe from a social perspective, from the perspective of fandom. But this decision is very, very important, an a priori decision, which I call. And it is definitely connected with some very intriguing notions like telepathy, like premonition, like prediction, hunch. But you know, these are not methods actually in reality. These the historian are using in terms of getting certain results in research. But when the historian would write the article, or for that matter book, these would not be mentioned at all. What would be mentioned are the sources gathered through these methods. So in a way, you are not actually challenging the conventional setup or methodology of history at all, but are using these tools to get access to sources which otherwise would have perished with time. Finally, your point about the journalist. Actually, when I started my research in the 1990s, I knew one thing for certain, that the sport journalists are the everyday historian of sports. They are the people who take notes and write about what has been happening throughout the time, say whatever, in the decades, through the ages. And that is why the journal account, journal methods are very, very from journalists, autobiographers, they are commentaries, unique insights, but they are not professional historians. They don't know how to deal with their themes historically, or probably from perspectives. So that is the difference. That is the kind of dividing line between sport historians, sport sociology, sport and political scientists dealing with sport, and social scientists and the journalists. But with the onset of media studies, now the media studies has a methodology, and they now approach the mega sports event from their own perspectives. And that is where we have got, we have actually have access to what the media studies have come up with, a very peculiar term, but has become very popular, nethnography. That is the online kind of ethnography. So that's where probably these different disciplines come together to create options for every discipline. I mean, it is important to borrow whatever you need from other disciplines. And that is how the world has to go. I mean, the world of academia has to go probably. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last questions, Cedric again.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Jean-Michel Duel. Well, Professor Kausik, I would like to know the social and economic stakes of sports in India. You know, I don't know much about India, so I would like to know the social, political, as well as the economic stakes of sport in India, as well as the impact of these stakes in the future, please. Thank you.
In India, I mentioned in my response to Professor Diwali's question that the healthy status of scholarship in India in the last 2 decades or so. Even in this particular lecture, I can find a few Indians, very young Indians, who are doing their PhDs on different aspects of sports history. The status is quite healthy, but what you were talking about, economic, social, or cultural texts, I mean, the kind of historiography that has developed, it has tried to focus on the one hand, histories of different sports, definitely focusing more and more on football and cricket, and probably to a certain extent on hockey, but histories of other sports are first coming up. Secondly, they have tried to understand how the social history of India has been influenced by sport and vice versa. That is, how sport influenced society, culture, economy of a region, and how the society, culture, and economy of a region has influenced particular sports. And last but not the least, mega sports events. Now, one may find one thing missing from my talk and in my responses. I have never mentioned women's sport. Why? The reason is very simple. I actually do not believe in women's history. I believe in history proper, where women and men have their own places together. So if you give equal importance, equitable to the stakeholders in sport, then you need not have, I probably focus on women's sport separately. Women's sport and men's sport are equally important. And that's how the Indian scholars, also probably the young Indian researchers, have also taken a route towards more and more holistic studies of sport, where men and women's sport are taking important parts, in important roles.
Okay, thank you so much for this very, very interesting subject. I think, Kausik, that you have a very, very interesting subject, and I hope that you will organize, I don't know, maybe a comparative webinar, or that you will continue, because it's I think fascinating subject. I think that we can build some comparison, etc. Then thank you very much. Thank you very much for your questions. And I can say you, if you see in your email, that our next webinar will be also more or less on history, 21 April, with Professor Dr. Flavio de Campos in USP, Sao Paulo University in Brazil, Brazilian football and devotional practice, 70 until 19. I think it will be also a great moment. Thank you very much. And I wait you for the next webinar. Please, if you have some ideas, if you want to present something, or one of your PhD want present a book, a research, etc. I think it's a very interesting space only to discuss together and to try to build link between all the part of the world. Good evening, and thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Kausik.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Good night.